Welcome to another insightful and in particular exciting episode of Me and My Health Up with your host, Anthony Harcher, a healthy man, according to my children, aka clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And today we'll be chatting with a scientist, nutritional therapist, international speaker, health and nutrition coach, and consultant, Matty Lansdown, on weight loss with a particular focus on metabolic flexibility and intermittent fasting. Matty is an in-demand nutritional therapist, international speaker, health and nutrition coach, and consultant for high-level corporate clients, business owners, and 9-to-5 workers. As a scientist of biology at a major Melbourne hospital, and having worked in the fields of cancer research and vaccine formulation, Matty developed the core belief that genetic diseases are, for most part, a result of misinformation and bad food consumption habits passed down from generation to generation, rather than a result of genetic predisposition to an illness. Matty's medical knowledge, combined with his extensive research and self-testing of non-traditional dieting and safe fasting methods, have made him an internationally recognized voice in the field of intermittent fasting and nutritional optimization. He is regularly invited to international wellness events, retreats, and conferences as a coach and panelist and a speaker. Likewise, Matt's weekly podcast on how to not get sick and die provides his followers with a deep dive into developing sustainable, healthy habits. And it's a fantastic podcast. I've had the joys of listening to it myself, and it's really entertaining. So without much further ado, I'm really keen to learn from Matty on how to shed those COVID kilos. So welcome, Matty. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks, Anthony. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on the show.
It's such a pleasure to have you on because you're a great entertainer. So I'm really looking forward to you entertaining me and my followers.
Well, let's have a crack.
So I'm really keen to, find out, just as I ask all my guests, is how you've arrived at what you're doing today. I'm really excited to hear about your journey.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I came along a sort of different path. I think most people in the health and nutrition space or wellness space often arrive here through the system failing them at some point. Maybe they had an illness or a disease and they, went from doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist until nothing worked, until they reached the point where they finally tried some ridiculous idea like nutrition or acupuncture or, insert alternative therapy, and saw some progress. And then they became a coach or a consultant or went and got a degree in that field. And that's most of my colleagues are sort of in that category. However, for myself, it was a little different. I'm very much blessed to have lived a very healthy life. But it was through extreme frustration that I ended up here. And what I mean by that is that I sort of grew up in the country, typical Aussie family, blue collar, working hard, and I was virtually the first person in my entire family to have an opportunity to go to university. And so off I went to the big smoke, to the city, to go to university and study, and I learnt about science and medicine, and then into research and cancer research. And so growing up in the country, mum was a nurse. I very much had this idea that medicine was, the be all and end all of human creation. And, wow, we're so impressive. We've created this behemoth of an industry that just helps so many people. And it wasn't until I worked in that industry that I realized how few people it actually helps. And which obviously for your listeners can be a bit of a triggering situation. But after working for many years in disease research, I realized that we help very few people. And I had an epiphany one day where I was in a sort of what they call a death audit, or a morbidity and mortality meeting, which I used to be a part of every single Monday for 7 years, basically. And early on in the piece, I had a realization that nobody ever talked about how the person had gotten the cancer. And then I sort of put two and two together and was like, hang on. So they out in their normal life, they eat and live in a way that means they end up obese, and then they get a disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer, dementia, insert disease. Then they come here, we give them some type of therapy, and then we send them back into the environment that created the disease. And at no point was there ever a discussion about the environment at home that the person was living in that created the disease. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. We're not talking about causation. And so for me, the thing that really stuck out was that diet and lifestyle, and the World Health Organization website says that diet and lifestyle are amongst the top three causes of cancer. And the hospital doesn't deal with it virtually at all. And so I was on a mission. I was just angry. I was like, it's out there. We know this. Doctors aren't educated in nutrition to be able to deal with it, or lifestyle. And, if you mention eating carrots or whatever in any type of therapy, people think you're crazy. So I was fired up. I was super fired up to be like, nutrition is making people obese, and obesity is the second biggest precursor to disease. So why don't we go back all the way back to the source and get people's food right? And so that's how I sort of ended up in this space today, working with weight loss, because if you can get that part right, if you can learn how to eat, it might not change the outcome of your life, but you will spend far less time dying.
Wow, that was one journey, and I can see how it all has come together for you in terms of your experience in the medical field, and how it's you've had insight into research, and the evidence is it's compelling there that there's a causation that's sitting there, that big white elephant in the room that it's being ignored, and
Absolutely.
And you're on a mission to to address that white elephant. We're going to paint that white elephant pink today. So
Absolutely.
you mentioned obesity.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's becoming more prevalent. And, I certainly remember my time of, going to school. There was few and far between, kids my age at the time that were, you consider overweight. But now you look around schools and it's like the norm.
Yeah.
And then, we've just been going through this COVID where we've been isolated and locked down. And, if you're locked in your house with just wine and, all your treats, then what are you going to do? Just consume away. So I'm really keen to delve into helping the listeners around weight loss, because I get lots of, inquiries about this question of weight loss and what's the best approach, and is there a secret sauce? So I want to hear Matty Lansdown's secret sauce recipe for weight loss.
There's so many sauce options, all sugar-free, obviously. No, but I think it's important to preface this conversation with the fact that everybody's different, and we go through different chapters in our life. And if you go onto Instagram, the diet wars are a real thing. Like, everybody's diet's better than everybody else's diet, and there's so many influencers that are just bashing other diets, and I'm really not a fan of the idea either that if your diet can't last your entire life, then it's virtually useless, because that's like saying one set of tires should last your entire life on your car. They wear down, things change, the terrain changes, you go through different experiences. So when it comes to clients, I think, and anyone, I think the universal thing that people need to understand in order to get any diet to work for them, or to find the right diet, is actually their psychology. What I've found from working with people is that the way that they see themselves and what they believe that they deserve is the biggest driver of successful outcomes. As you know, Anthony, the recidivism rate of weight loss is like 98%. Like, it's monstrous. And that's not because all of the diets, even some of the ridiculous ones that make no sense, they all work for somebody, because the person's psychology was in the right place at the right time. So the biggest secret sauce that sort of covers everyone is having the right mindset about what you deserve, what you should go through in order to get what you need, to change the mindset. A big thing with parents, and parent guilt and mum guilt is a real thing, but a lot of mums, particularly that I work with, they've been putting everybody else first their entire lives. And so, of course, their body is suffering, And so it's changing this psychology behind self-care is actually really the best form of parenting. And I take this idea back to when I was a teenager. It was actually similar that, there was not really many overweight kids around, but I remember my sister and we used to walk to high school, and we'd walk past this house, and we knew this woman that lived there because obesity wasn't super common at the time, and this woman was really obese, and everybody knew that that was the woman. We lived in a small country town, but she had a daughter that went to high school with myself and my sister, and was about the same age, and we watched her over the course of our high school years become her mother, literally in every possible way. And this is why I come back. This is where I come back to self-care is actually the best form of parenting, because in the context of health, because your child will be you. They will grow up to model you in every single way. You'll get the odd black sheep and you'll get the odd rebel, but mostly your children will become you. So if you don't show them that self-care and health is important, if you just tell them, but you don't do it yourself, you don't live it yourself, then you're not creating, a great family environment. You're doing the leadership form of do as I say, not as I do, which is arguably a terrible form of leadership. And so it comes back to that psychology. You're then not just doing it for yourself, but building in your children as well. So if anybody takes anything away from this podcast today, I think it's that you need to build psychology that makes you feel worthwhile of going on a health journey, that makes you feel better, transforming your body into something you feel you deserve. Because a lot of people get somewhere with their health challenges or journey, and they're so unfamiliar with being in a body that's 10 kilos lighter or 20 or 30, or that they sort of sabotage themselves all the way back to where they began. And that's a psychological thing. So self-care is really important, but you need the psychology to support being deserving of that experience.
Absolutely. I totally agree. It all starts, with the mind and the attitude, and certainly, prioritizing that health. So what is it, when you're working with your clients, how do you get them to shift that psychology around self-care and, walking the talk? As you said, it's so important. So is there a particular process that you take your clients through in terms of shifting that psychology?
Absolutely. I think nowadays it's sort of, mental health is really becoming a big part of a normal conversation, and tools in order to, change the state of your mind is becoming quite normal. People go to yoga, meditation. These are really starting to be normal parts of conversation for people. And what that does, tools like that and hypnosis, and even just chatting to a psychologist, directly, all of these things open up the possibility for you to change the way you see the world and the way that you see yourself. And so most people haven't actually begun that process or learnt the art of being able to do that for themselves. And so with all my clients, the first thing we do before we talk about food at all is we learn the art of self-observation, learning how to get outside yourself and observe what's happening, take the emotion out of it and be like, oh, okay, so when this thing pops up and triggers me, I then go to the cupboard, and then a bag of Doritos is knocked over and a packet of Tim Tams, and then we'll start again tomorrow. And nobody's not nobody, but very few people have this skill. And so developing that skill is step one, because once you can objectively see all the parts moving without your emotional attachment to the process, you can be like, okay, I can start experimenting with these different parts. Most people think, getting the right mindset is like hustle culture. It's like, just get up and be better. Just get up and be stronger. And that's, that works sometimes, but it's not really sustainable. There's got to be some empathy and some understanding. And I think the key is, learning the art of self-observation, or learning to, experience your emotions as they come up and put them over there and put them out of the way and deal with them in different ways. It's about approaching that kind of thing with curiosity, not anger and judgment that you're not good enough and, oh shit, again, I suck at this, because all of that's just beginning the spiral down. So I think beginning with the art of self-observation and just observing what's happening for yourself is the perfect place to start.
Yeah, so it's really that, becoming aware of yourself, your activities, what you're doing, and what triggers those from the environment. And once you have that level of awareness, then you can instigate change. Yeah.
Absolutely. You can't interrupt a process that you don't know about. So if you just try and, just go to the supermarket and just buy healthy food, and, you're not acknowledging the cause of what's going on when you buy unhealthy food or when you behave in a way that's not optimal for yourself. If you don't know what's wrong there, you can't fix it. Just ignoring it never works.
Absolutely. Totally agree. It's not that, ignorance is bliss. It's, we
It'll come and bite you on the bum somewhere.
Absolutely. It will catch up. Those COVID kilos will creep up on you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of weight loss, I hear a lot this questioning around, should I do intermittent fasting? What should I do? Why does it work? Is it going to work for me? What's your thoughts on intermittent fasting?
As you know, I'm a massive fan of intermittent fasting. I think one of the things I identified from working in a hospital was that people over the last 100 years basically have been progressively increasing both their meal size and their meal frequency, and now we have a population that's basically fat, sick, and nearly dead. So it doesn't take a genius to think we're probably eating too much food. The question is, why aren't we feeling full? Right? Why aren't we feeling full? And that comes down to the quality of the food. So intermittent fasting is something that we all practice every single day for all of human history. It's not a thing that you decide to do one day and you don't, because as long as you go to bed at night, you're intermittent fasting. You're having a period of the day where you're not putting food into your body. And so it's just this ratio between feeding or eating and not eating or fasting. And there's a difference as well between fasting and starving. Starving is completely involuntary and leads to chronic malnutrition and all sorts of things. Fasting is a totally voluntary thing that you do in a safe setting in a body that's should be well conditioned with nutrition and the right types of food. So I think intermittent fasting is a very useful tool because it starts to take us back to the days where our gastrointestinal system had a day off. And not even just a day off, but even more than 12 hours. Most people in my sort of practice that I see, they basically are about 12-12 roughly. So they're eating for 12 hours of the day and they're fasting for 12 hours of the day. And so we then begin to move that needle. So it's not about calorie restriction. That can be an important component. You can utilize that as a tool, but mostly it's just about moving those calories into a particular window of the day. And as well, in that fasting window, as that fasting window gets bigger, the reconstruction of your sort of cell lining of the gastrointestinal system has more of an opportunity to repair and recover because it's not doing work. Imagine going to work every single day until the day you died. You probably could have lived longer if you took a few weekends, right? It's the same with your gut, with your stomach, with all of the mechanisms that partake in digestion, is that we're just giving them more recovery time each day. And that also allows our metabolism to switch into burning the body fat that's on our body as a form of energy. So normally, obviously, most people are eating sugar and carb-rich diets. So we've got enough fuel in the blood or in the glucose stores, the glycogen stores to fuel the body. But once those are depleted, a lot of people have the idea, or the marketing sells us the idea, that if we don't eat every 2 hours or 6 times a day, we'll pass out and die. Or if your blood sugar drops, if that was true, humans would have never made it past year 1 about 1 million years ago, right? It's very normal. Your genetics are conditioned for this fluctuation between feasting and fasting. And by the way, in those days, fasting was days and weeks on a very regular basis. And so we've got this memory in our DNA. And that's where metabolic flexibility comes into it. So the idea of metabolic flexibility is that intermittent fasting allows us to fast just long enough that we start transitioning from this sugar burning into this fat burning. And then depending on the diet that we have on the other end, the nutrition we have on the other end, we can actually continue that whilst we eat as well. But the idea is with this flexibility is that we start utilizing different fuel sources, which has multiple benefits in the body.
Wonderful response. So, really, there's so much in that you shared. So I thank you, Matty. It's awesome. Just I have some follow-on questions in relation to, you first mentioned the quality of food. So really keen to, delve into that a bit more. And then secondly was, is there a real ideal timing around this intermittent fasting?
Mm.
Because, you said most people are doing this 12 and 12, and then you
Mm.
gradually increase that needle so they're fasting for a bit longer. Do you find there's a better point at which they get better results?
Mm.
Yeah, so just that quality and that timing.
Yeah, the quality is a really good question because, like, if we go down to the foundational reasons why we eat, there's obviously nutrition, but actually in the first world, there's very few people, unless you're orthorexic, anorexic, or bulimic. You're very likely that those people should not be experimenting with this, by the way. And there's no research about pregnancy either. But everybody else it's very unlikely we're going to be so severely malnutritioned that we shouldn't, start experimenting with this. So the reasons why we eat, apart from needing nutrition to run our body, there's two reasons beyond that in 2021. And the two reasons beyond that are emotions. And we all found out that's why a lot of people have COVID kilos, is because we had nothing to do. We had very limited human experience or human interaction. And so we ate our emotions. And a lot of people were doing that beforehand anyway. And the second reason is that we don't feel full. So we're not satiated when we eat. And that comes down to the quality of the food. So the first one is the emotions. That's totally different work. That's the mindset work that we were talking about before, and understanding your relationship with food and why you use that as a resolution to a particular emotional experience. And then the second one is the quality of the food. So if we're eating protein, foods that are lacking protein, that are really high in sugar and carbs, so they're energy dense, they're very high calories, but they're nutrient poor, we're going to struggle to feel full. It's that situation where you're at the end of like some kind of dinner or some kind of binge and you feel stuffed, but you still find yourself swinging on the pantry cupboard or the fridge. You're like, I feel like I couldn't fit anything else in, but I'm still looking for it. And like from a physiological standpoint, that's often an insufficiency of protein in everything that you have consumed. So when we talk about the types of food we need to eat to satisfy the satiation in our stomach and our brain, we want to eat whole real foods. We've got sufficient protein on the plate. We want to have healthy whole real carbs. So we're talking, sweet potatoes. We're talking any type of vegetable basically is going to be a great carbohydrate source. And then of course your fats, so your avocados, your coconut, or it can be meats that cover the protein and fat, like ground beef. So having these whole real food sources and particular making sure you've got the protein component in there, is going to allow you to feel satiated, so you're less likely to go and consume excessive nutrient poor but energy rich calories in the way of Tim Tams, Doritos, those kinds of foods, ice cream. So yeah.
Awesome. And in terms of the protein, you said adequate amount of protein. Have you got any rules of thumbs around how much protein should be with each meal?
I personally, with the clients I work with, recommend about 30 grams of protein. Because above 30 grams, we struggle to utilize it, all of it. We often excrete it through the kidneys. But I would aim, for most people, I would aim for about 30 grams of protein. And actually, so if you work out a lot as well, so on workout days, 30 is good, but you might even be open to pushing it up higher on the non-workout days, which is potentially counterintuitive, but the idea is that it actually, because your workout didn't kickstart the protein synthesis process, that overloading it's not quite overloading, but putting excess protein into the system on your non-workout days can be a thing too. But we're really starting to split hairs in that conversation.
And you got any ideal quality sources of protein? You mentioned a few, but you got any go-tos around good protein sources?
Yeah, so a lot of people cringe at this, but I grew up in the country, so this is pretty normal for me. But particularly for people that are looking for lean protein, that are looking to lose weight and they're looking for good healthy sources, I often go to venison, kangaroo, wallaby, and crocodile. Now, why those foods? I know listeners are going to be like, I have never eaten those foods in my life, but why those foods? So we kind of get into a detox conversation here, but most of those animals are actually hunted in the wild. And so they're not factory farmed, they're not living single feed lives, so they're not living on grain, they're not being hidden from the sun where they would, normally get their vitamin D from the sun, like all animals. They're living their natural life, and they're lean sources of protein because those animals are very active and they don't overeat. They don't get antiviral injections or B12 injections and all of these artificial and synthetic compounds put into their bodies. So it's not only it's a leaner protein source, it's like a healthier protein source because it hasn't lived a factory farmed life.
Yeah, wow. I certainly I enjoy all those ones you mentioned. I've had them all, and they're lovely. They've got a unique taste. I must say, crocodile's probably best like chicken or closest to chicken.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for listeners, some of that meat can be a little bit expensive. So, going to your grass-fed ground beef, or even just any ground beef or mince, from a red-blooded animal is ideal. You're going to get all sorts of great protein and nutrition in those types of food.
I'm keen to get you as a scientist perspective on this game changers, because we've just touched on we've touched on sort of quality protein. What is it? And you've mentioned meat sources essentially. Good, lean, high quality meat sources that live naturally in the wild. And there's this game changers that keeps coming up in conversations, and people are going, it's all about plant-based, only plant-based. So I'm really keen to get your perspective on this game changers, plant-based, and it's the way to go. So what's your thoughts?
This is a good way to get me fired up.
Good.
So I guess the first thing is that as a scientist, The Game Changers was a really, really terrible documentary. And I did an episode of my podcast essentially debunking this because in many of the instances, they used elite athletes, and who listening is an elite athlete? Like, 1% of the listeners or less, right? Elite athletes, and they were tested randomly in a group of 3. That's not a clinical study at all. It's not representative of the population. And overnight, they fed them a burrito one day and then not a burrito. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, and they tested their erections as well. Again, 3 elite athletes. Like, overnight, we're talking a time frame of what? 48 hours, 72 hours, maybe maximum. None of that reflects the reality that you or I or any of the the listeners are likely living in. And so it was very much, to me, a vegan propaganda film. And it's important to acknowledge that James Cameron, who directed it, owns one of the world's biggest pea protein companies. So there's some, politics in the background going on there too. But there was very little science in it. And now, I guess, to go to sort of what is the sort of biological reality of a vegan diet, it's important to remember that vegan diets are only found in the Western world, really, because they're diets of privilege. And it's not to say that you can't get all of the things you need on a vegan diet, but the truth is, in order to live an optimal life like an elite athlete or like a bodybuilder that's been vegan, is that your supplement collection has to be massive. Like, you need all sorts of different supplements if you're an elite athlete living a vegan lifestyle, because you cannot get all of the things you need from just plants. And we know that because a lot of people that are on vegan diets, in fact, 90% of them need to supplement B12. Now, if we weren't in a world where, we've got a relatively okay government that's making sure that we all get food and we've all got enough pay from our jobs to be able to buy food, then we're fortunate enough to be able to say, hey, I can be vegan because I have moral and ethical issues. Now, I agree that that's okay, but understand that you're in a privileged world already if your point of view is that I'm choosing not to eat meat because of a moral or ethical issue. If we go down to core human nutrition, you cannot survive on a vegan diet for very long. And I've interviewed multiple people on my podcast that were nutritionists, naturopaths, and they were vegans for a couple of years. And there's a honeymoon period for everyone. Everyone feels great on a new diet for 2 weeks up to 2 years. But for vegans, they often start experiencing some type of problem in the 2 to 5 year mark. And then, beyond that, things start to really fall apart. Some people can. If you're supplementing correctly and you have all of the right supplements and making sure that all your micro and macronutrients are covered via your supplements and your diet, then of course you can make it happen. But it is very much a diet of privilege, and most of us aren't elite athletes with a cohort of doctors, nutritionists, dietitians, making sure that we get all of the things into our diet and into our regime every single day. And I think that's why often people do get sick from veganism. It's a functional problem. In the first 2 weeks, you've watched the Game Changers, you're really excited, and you're like, let's be vegan. And so in the first 2 or 3 weeks, you're willing to drive all the way out to the alternative food shop that's way out of town to get your things, and you're willing to go and do these, and then it becomes less exciting. And you're like, oh, this is a lot of work, so I'll just eat the things I've got immediate access to and can save money on. And then that restricts the number of foods that you're putting into your body, right? So therefore, you're restricting the amount of micronutrients and potentially essential nutrients. So I think my general answer is that veganism and vegetarianism is a bit different, but veganism is a diet of privilege. And if you want to be true to your biology, then being an omnivore is what we're designed to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Matty. I think you summed up really well. Just keen to find out what episode that is, and I'll include it in the show notes.
Yeah, I don't remember. I've done 130 odd now, but I'll find it for you and send it over.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes because I'm sure people want to know more insight in terms of debunking that terrible documentary. So you've really summed it up well anyway for those that are time poor. So thanks, Matty.
You're welcome.
In terms of the metabolic flexibility, you touched on it earlier around this switch over. Initially your body's burning the sugars, the using up the glycogen stores, and then it will revert to fat burning. And you also touched on, before on that timing point. So really keen to get into this timing as to, going back to the intermittent fasting, as well as, I guess, referring back to the metabolic flexibility. Is there an ideal time that you find that people, basically get great results in terms of how long they need to fast for to get into this fat burning?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think it's different for everybody. We start from a clinical perspective, you start seeing ketone bodies increase. So the ketones, the burning of the fat in the bloodstream, basically, you start seeing that at about 12 to 13 hours. And so it's not necessarily a total on-off switch. We're always burning both, but it's about switching that, moving that ratio in favor of the body fat, burning the body fat essentially. So we're often really high with burning sugars and carbs and the stuff that we've eaten in our meals. And there's a sort of, the simmering down the bottom is a low level of burning ketones and burning fat, but it's mainly the, freely available blood sugar that's in our blood. And once we deplete that, we start to shift that ratio, and we start seeing that in the blood increase from about 13 hours roughly. However, if we're just going to do sort of 13-11 as our intermittent fasting ratio, it's going to take a very, very long time in order for us to burn all of our body fat. So I think most people feel comfortable at about 16-8. And it's a combination, right? We can talk about what's best for weight loss, but if that's the only thing you're working on, great. But most people have lives, they've got families, they've got kids, they've got stressful jobs, and there's other things to factor into the equation. So I think a good place to aim towards is 16-8 for most people, and then start experimenting from there. You can even go as far as doing OMAD. And OMAD is 1 meal a day, which is literally 23 in 1, basically. But you need to make that meal very nutrient dense, very energy dense. So it's a very big meal. But I think, 16-8, a lot of people feel comfortable there. But it's important to acknowledge that for women, it's very important to navigate this space slowly, because if you start playing with your nutrient intake, most people's nutrient intake, because life is life, it has sort of been so sporadic and sort of not quite appropriate for so long that we've got these hormonal problems for women that are really, really sensitive to, the change in carbs coming in, the change in different sort of foods that build neurotransmitters and foods that build hormones. And so if if you've got any history of having challenges with your hormones or your menstrual cycle, enter into this space very slowly. And I call it 1 tweak a week, is that you only make 1 hour shift or even 30-minute shift per week at a maximum, right? And you might even go less than that. It might be like 3 days this week, I'm going to try and do, whatever it is, 14-10. But figure out your baseline and then move one step from there. Don't listen to this podcast and go, right, I'm doing OMAD tomorrow. Definitely don't do it that way, because you need to train your metabolism, train your psychology, and train your energy requirement to be able to adapt to this system. And there's a great quote, which is that the slower the adaptation, the longer the stability. And so the opposite is true. The faster the adaptation, the lower the stability, right? So if we just jump into a diet on Monday and try all these extreme changes, not much is going to happen, and we'll be back where we started in about 2 weeks, right? So we want to make these changes progressive over time, 1 tweak a week. So I think to answer your initial question, 16-8 is a good place to aim for, but go there slowly. And once you're there, start experimenting with more.
So baby steps. I love it. Yeah,
that's the one.
Small incremental improvements makes it easier and sustainable. Yeah, fantastic. So just on that point of, you've mentioned the 16 and 8, do a gradual, 30-minute change from what you're currently doing, whether you're doing 12 and 12, do 1 week, 12 and a half hours, and then go to 13 hours in terms of increasing that fasting period. So do that gradually. And you mentioned the women population is, someone that needs to really, take this words of wisdom in terms of this slow incremental approach and not go
absolutely.
radical. Is there any other populations that should, take an easier approach, or it just doesn't work for?
That's a good question. So I haven't seen a particular population that it just doesn't work for, because there's a few layers, right? So you can not change anything from a nutrition standpoint and introduce intermittent fasting, and you'll still see some results. You can then change your nutrition and your intermittent fasting schedule, and you'll see further results. And so the people that it might not work for might have a history of disordered eating, might have a history of malnutrition or starvation periods, and so their body and their preservation genes are really solidly switched on. And in that case, we want to be looking at far more than just the nutrition, right? We want to be looking at the HbA axis. We want to be looking at their hormonal profile, doing potentially Dutch tests and these types of things. And so, we're getting into much more complicated space in that area. But from a total, from a totally nutrition standpoint, and someone that's just sort of gained, extra couple of kilos over the years, it should work for most people. However, I think it's beneficial to every population to go in progressively. Any radical change your body's gonna remember that you put it under that stress, and your metabolism's not gonna be happy about it, basically.
And in terms of duration, so is this something you recommend for a lifetime? Or, people have heard about this 5 and 2, so 5 days normal calories and then 2 days really low calorie restriction. So is there like so what's your thoughts around the duration, how long someone should do it for?
Yeah, so I think my first sort of disclaimer is, if it works for you, awesome, right? So I'm not out to necessarily push my idea of how you should do nutrition. If you have something that works for you, you feel good, your psychology's supported, amazing. On the contrary, my sort of feeling and my expertise tells me that 5-2 is a battle, because we're picking days where we're having such a low calorie amount that we're actually going to end up hungry and craving foods. And so that's what I've found with people that have tried the 5-2 is they can't sustain it, because on those 2 days they're essentially teasing the system with a little bit of nutrition. It's like, you've got a factory Monday to Friday that's got 100 workers and you're pumping out the goods, and then on Saturday and Sunday you want to pump out the same amount of goods, but you only send 10 blokes into the warehouse, right? That's the way that I see it. And I think that it's more beneficial to be consistent over time, to develop a pattern, much like sleep. Like it's better to get up at the same time every single day, go to bed at the same time every single day. And so I think, if it's not working for you or you're finding it challenging, you want to find something that still pushes you out of your comfort zone a little bit, but that's not, you're not convincing yourself all day, don't go to the fridge, don't go to the fridge, don't go to the fridge. You don't want to be battling through this process. I think learning, to love the journey is really important, but it also shouldn't be painful. So I think, yeah, if it works for you, awesome. But if you are having those, you're really struggling on those low calorie days, there's an option actually. And I know a lot of people that I work with end up in this space, is that you might get to the point, and I myself am in this space. I don't really actively do intermittent fasting every day. I don't track anything, but once every 8 to 12 weeks, I do a 3 to 5 day water fast. Now you need again 1 tweak a week. You need lots of practice to get there. This takes years to get used to. You should not jump into this on Monday. But one idea is, once you've got you're sort of at your goal weight, and maybe you even want to start gaining weight now, maybe gain some muscle, you're starting to go to the gym, you want to build that booty, whatever it might be, you might actually be like, you know what, because I do workouts in the morning and I need to get my protein in the hour after that workout, I'm actually not going to track an intermittent fasting schedule strictly. But it could be once a week. I've done that with diabetic clients, that once a week we dive into a 24-hour or a 36-hour fast. Now, this is just a different approach to the same concept, which is allowing our gastrointestinal system, our insulin and our hormones and our hunger hormones to come down and experience being down below baseline. Conventional marketing and education will tell you that as soon as your blood sugar's low, it's a big problem. I would gladly debate that every single day of the week. But the point is that you can get to different protocols and different ideas. Again, it comes back to where we started, is that, different horses for courses, right? Courses for horses is that, depending on the chapter you're in, on what you're trying to achieve, something different is likely to apply. Generally speaking, you don't want to be struggling through every day if it's a calorie-based thing. And counting calories is not fun for most people.
No, it takes away the joys of food, doesn't it? It really,
totally.
And you start labeling it, and it just creates, as you said, all this emotional, disconnection. And then, obviously you feel bad, you start self-sabotaging, and then you go on this spiral. You'll end up eating probably twice as much because, you've got that emotional, I guess, disconcern about it. So Matty, you've shared so much wonderful knowledge, and I really appreciate that. Just how can listeners best connect with you in terms of if they want further support?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got obviously my podcast, which you yourself have been on a great episode, and that's called How to Not Get Sick and Die. You can find that on any podcast app. You can find me on Instagram at Matty Lansdown. Also, I have a Facebook group, which I can share the link with you too. So you're more than welcome to jump into my Facebook group and ask as many questions as you like.
Absolutely. I'll share all those links in the show notes for listeners. And any concluding thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
No pressure. I've just got to be wise now. I've got to think of a wise statement. I think my final thing would be, just be kind to yourself, is that these journeys are challenging. Like, there's, irrelevant of what's happened in the past, these journeys are challenging, and building a psychology that is interested and curious about the journey rather than, being forceful and beating yourself up because you've got to do this because society says you should look a certain way is the wrong way to go about it. You find something in your world that motivates you to be, like, I'm going to be healthy because I feel better, or I perform better at work, or I'm a better mother, or I'm a better father, and be curious in the journey. I think that's the most important part, is approaching nutrition with curiosity rather than because I have to, is much more favorable.
Absolutely. That curiosity will bring out the joys, and you'll connect with the joys and keep going on that journey. So couldn't agree more. And that is wonderful words of wisdom to conclude this episode with. So I really want to thank you, Matty, for sharing all this knowledge and debunking some of these myths and really uncovering what intermittent fasting really is and how it can work for the listeners. And for the listeners, if you've liked the episode, please like and share it, write a review so that it gets to more people and we can get Matty's good words of wisdom out to everyone that, could really benefit during this time. So please share it, and stay tuned for more insightful episodes of Me and My Health Up.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome, Matty. It was awesome.